All right, let's get started, okay? Let's call the meeting of the Forensic Science Board to order, okay? Hope you all had a good holiday and that you're all doing well, okay? I want to
David, you're on mute.
Am I there now?
Yes.
Good. All right. Let's start over again, okay? Let's call the meeting to order. Hope you all are doing well and that you had a good holiday, okay? I remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and ask everyone to mute your microphone, which I just was an example, okay? That's what that was. Mute your microphones when you're not speaking. Also remind everyone that when you speak, that you should state your name beforehand so that Ms. Taylor has that information for purposes of the minutes. Ms. Taylor, would you take a roll call to confirm that we have a quorum present?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Colonel DeBoard,
This is Maggie DeBoard here.
Director Dion,
Shannon Dion is present.
Dr. Edinburgh, Senator Edwards, Dr. Gormley,
Bill Gormley's present.
Carl Haid,
Carl Hade's present.
Delegate Herring,
I'm present.
Caroline Jurin, David Lett,
I'm here.
Colette McKeechee, Rich Myers.
Present.
Dr. Edinburgh, are you here?
I am. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right.
Colonel Settle, Dr. Tony,
Present.
Holly Wood.
Present.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Good. Our first order of business then is to the adoption of the agenda. You should have received a copy of the draft agenda from Ms. Taylor some time ago. I ask for a motion to adopt the draft agenda. And I ask that you remember to state your full name before making any statements, okay?
Carl Hade, move to adopt.
Is there a second?
Bill Gormley, second.
Agenda is adopted.
I'm sorry, David, I have to do the roll call first.
Let's back up a little bit. I do need a roll call. Ms. Taylor, give us a roll call, please, for the votes.
All right. Colonel DeBoard,
Maggie DeBoard, yes.
Director Dion,
Shannon Dion, yes.
Dr. Edinburgh,
Aye.
Dr. Gormley,
Bill Gormley, yes.
Mr. Haid,
Aye.
Delegate Herring,
Aye.
Mr. Lett,
Aye.
Mr. Myers,
Aye.
Dr. Tony,
Denise Tony, yes.
Ms. Wood.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay, the agenda has been adopted. Let's move on. The next item is the approval of the draft minutes from the October 15th, 2020 meeting. Ms. Taylor previously shared the draft minutes with all of you. Are there any proposed changes to the minutes from the last meeting? If no amendments, ask for a motion to approve the draft minutes. Is there a motion to approve the draft minutes?
Charnel Hearing, so moved.
Is there a second?
Maggie DeBoard, second.
Ms. Taylor, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Colonel DeBoard,
Maggie DeBoard, yes.
Director Dion,
Shannon Dion, yes.
Dr. Edinburgh,
West Edinburgh, aye.
Dr. Gormley,
Bill Gormley, yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Carl Hayes, yes.
Delegate Herring,
Delegate Hearing, yes.
Mr. Lett,
Yes.
Mr. Myers,
Yes.
Dr. Tony,
Denise Tony, yes.
Ms. Wood.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Meeting minutes have been approved. Going to move on. We're going to skip the board chair's report and move to DFS director's report. Ms. Jackson. Ms. Jackson, I think. Ms. Jackson? Can anybody hear Ms. Jackson?
How about now?
We got you now. That's good.
Okay, apparently my headphones don't work well.
That's all right.
Okay, let me share my screen. And I will. Sorry. Presentation, I would appreciate it. It says I should be presenting at this point.
I can see it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can hear you as well.
Okay, great. Hold on, I got a text from Colonel Settle. Let me answer him real quick, that we are having the board meeting. Okay. So thank you for coming today. And one piece of information that I would like to share is that Jennifer Taylor, who has been handling our Forensic Science Board secretarial duties, has accepted a position in our procurement section, actually a little while ago, but her position had been frozen. But we have now hired her replacement, who should be on board for the next Forensic Science Board meeting. So I just wanted to thank her for her service to the board and let you know. So the meeting materials are available on our website, and I just wanted to, for anyone who is on the call who is not a member, give that address for where this PowerPoint can be found. And it did get updated this morning from what was sent yesterday to board members. And that is because our workload statistics became available today on the 6th. They're always run on the 6th. And so I wanted to update 2 slides so that we would have fourth quarter numbers included. So obviously COVID and the pandemic have played a big part of our year. And so I just wanted to give you an update on where we are as an agency having to do with COVID-19. We have had some positive staff members, and so we are making the appropriate notifications when a staff member tests positive. And we have also notified the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner and other tenants that we have in the buildings that we manage and own. And so that is all being done as per the DOLE temporary regulations that are in place and our policies that we created to meet those. We have developed our own capability to do the internal disinfection that is needed when we do have a positive. And so that has been helpful so that it is a lot easier to coordinate with our own folks to do that disinfection than to hire an outside vendor to do that with their scheduling. And so that has been very helpful in minimizing downtime. And we are continuing to encourage our staff to utilize alternate work schedules and telework when possible. Our scientific staff, most of them do not have the capability of doing a lot of teleworking because laboratory work pretty much has to be done in the laboratory. And so that's why we are trying to do some other things to minimize the population in the lab by having staggered schedules and that type of thing. And so overall, we're just trying to minimize any disruption to customers when staff are out. And just as an example, our central laboratory evidence receiving staff is actually working with a very minimal staff this week. And we have worked with customers to move some of the scheduled trips to come to the lab for evidence submission and pickup to next week so that they would not have to spend undue time in the laboratory waiting while we're at such limited staff. And we have some staff in other sections who are helping out in evidence receiving this week, which is appreciated as well. Our case statistics and breath alcohol statistics have been impacted by the pandemic. And so you can see here in January and February, looking at the amount of breath tests that were run on the evidential breath test instruments that are out in the field, were actually higher in January and February than they had been in 2019. But after that, there was a marked drop off, and it has been recovering. And so we are still seeing less breath tests being run than in the previous year. We do think that this may be due to an increase in the amount of blood being collected for testing instead of using breath tests. And so that is something that we are hearing from some agencies and need to keep an eye on because we are having increases in our toxicology submissions from other directions as well. And so it is a trend that we need to make sure that we are monitoring. There have been a lot of changes to the workload statistics this year versus last year. So just two of the pieces of information, looking at case submissions and looking at the overall backlog, which is in our terminology is any case that's available to be worked. So once it's submitted, it becomes counted in the backlog or the caseload, so to speak. And so you can see that we have had significantly fewer controlled substances cases that have been submitted. And these numbers are for the fourth quarter, so October, November, and December. And that has allowed us to really get a handle on our backlog in the controlled substances section. It is significantly reduced, and that is partially due to the lowered submissions, but also because we had received additional staff to work controlled substances cases, and those folks in general have all completed their training at this time. So we are at the capacity where we would need to be if our submissions were as they had been in years past. And so we are working to, we are certainly keeping that capacity available. I have heard from other laboratories around the country that their submissions have started to come back. Ours seem a little bit slower, but I want to make sure that we have that pre-pandemic capacity so that when things do change, we now have that backlog under control So when cases start coming back in the door at pre-pandemic levels, we should have the capacity to do them, and the backlog should not rise in the way that it was before. Also, another thing that has been helpful in doing casework during this time is that we have had less subpoenas and less time out of the laboratory due to court testimony. And that is obviously because the courts were not hearing trials, and so therefore our folks were not needed. We have tried to encourage the use of video testimony, and we have had success in certain jurisdictions, and we have, previous to the pandemic, we pretty much did any video testimony using our Polycom units, but we have gotten webcams and are now able to provide video testimony in any kind of, using any platform that the court would be interested in using, and have had success with that. So hopefully that's something that we can continue to encourage, due to the fact that, you know, when you drive to court 3 hours away and then you wait for your turn to testify and provide that testimony and then drive 3 hours back, that's a lot of time out of the laboratory where you were not able to do casework. We've also had a drop in submissions in our digital and multimedia evidence section, and their backlog has gotten more under control, which is excellent. But it's not all it's not all decreases. In our firearms and toxicology sections, we are seeing increases in the amount of cases that are submitted, particularly firearms. And because in firearms we have 4 examiners that are in training and another position that is in the hiring process, so that's 5 examiners that are not able to do casework for firearms examinations, that backlog in firearms has gone up significantly over what it was in 2019. For toxicology, we are, with the increase in cases, a lot of those additional cases are coming from the medical examiner's office due to an increase in overdose deaths. And so we are moving cases around the state so that we can utilize our resources most appropriately to try and get their cases done within the amount of time they need for their accreditation. We currently are down a few examiners in the central toxicology section, and so mostly the cases are moving from Richmond to the northern lab and to our western lab in Roanoke. We are working on a proposal for utilizing some of the money that we had been given for outsourcing controlled substances cases, or the seized drug cases, for using that for outsourcing some OC&E cases, so that we can assist them getting their information back in a timely manner while we are working on these capacity issues. So that's something that's in the works. So this just shows, this is what's available on our website, and shows our average turnaround time for the cases that were completed in the month of December. And so you can see that the average turnaround time for the drug section statewide is 38 days. And I will say that currently we are still finishing digging ourselves out of the hole in northern. So in our northern laboratory, it is more like 66 days, but then in central and in western, it is under 30 days. I have some timing on this presentation that I don't understand why it's moving forward, so I apologize that it keeps flipping. Just to give you an update on our Central Laboratory Capital Project, we are currently in the preliminary design phase, and I believe today was the day that our architectural firm was planning to submit the preliminary drawings to DGS, the Division of Engineering and Buildings. And so this is a process where DEB will provide comments back, and there will be a back and forth to adjudicate those comments. And then once that has been done, a final budget for the project will be determined. Just as a reminder, our budget initially was from the capital pool from 2014, and that was for a renovation expansion project. The project scope was changed in a legislative session, I think 2 years ago, to include the option of building a new building. And we have bought the land up in Hanover County for that building to move forward. So one of the other things that they are working on right now is developing their proposal for how to achieve the Green Globes certification, which is something that is desirable to show how energy efficient the building is. And you can see how the timeline has not changed, and with hopefully everything going according to plan, we would be able to break ground by the end of this year. For our accreditation, we were notified, and I reported at our last meeting that we had done everything needed to successfully complete our assessment this year for continued accreditation. We just actually very recently got our updated certificates and scopes. The scope is what kind of outlines what exactly we're allowed to do under our certification or accreditation. And so those are posted on our website. We will get updated ones soon for our Eastern and Western laboratory because we just went through a remote scope extension review where they came in and looked at all of our documentation for performing YSTR analysis in the DNA section in Eastern and Western. And, you know, we put that online a few months ago. And so now we're doing YSTRs in all 4 of our labs. And so that remote scope extension was successful. We were approved for all of that just this week. And so that scope will be updated and those scopes will be updated and put on the website as soon as we receive them. One other test, the trigger pull analysis or examination that is done in our firearms section, that is currently not listed on our scope of accreditation, and we will have to go through a scope extension just like we did for YSTR once we have calculated our uncertainty of measurement for that particular analysis. One other thing that we have done in the accreditation and compliance world is that we did complete our DNA on-site quality assurance standards audit in early December. And so that is, those are the FBI requirements for DNA, and that is what allows us to have access to CODIS, the National Data Bank, and that searching capability. So that is a good thing too. In November of 2020, we published our annual report on what was in the drug cases that were submitted to the department in the calendar year 2019. And because our backlog was so high, it wasn't until November or October, I guess, that we actually completed all of the cases that had been submitted in calendar year 2019, because we can't report on what was in the cases until we've completed them. And so this is a joint report between DFS and the Criminal Justice Services. Their data analyst is awesome and uses our data to do several things in forecasting in the criminal justice world, but also puts it together for this report. The one thing of interest in this drug cases submitted graph on the right is that since statistics have been kept in Virginia, this is the first year where more items contained methamphetamine than any other compound. So for many years it was marijuana. So more items contained were marijuana. But then once we quit taking in simple possession cases, our marijuana submissions went down, and then cocaine was the most prevalent drug for many, many years. And then this year is the first year that methamphetamine has beaten cocaine. Another thing just to point out is that although there are continued decreases in the amount of cases containing heroin and containing prescription opioids, cases containing illicit synthetic opioids, and that does include fentanyl itself if it is in any kind of form other than a transdermal patch, because that would be considered to be most likely illicitly obtained. That those cases do continue to rise, and that is in line with the continued overdoses with fentanyl that are reported from the medical examiner's office. So we did recommend 12 additional compounds that we had seen in the laboratory or that were concerns to the laboratory to the Board of Pharmacy in October. Those compounds were considered at the board's meeting in December and are pending their final approval. So our chemistry program manager, Robin Weimer, attended the Board of Pharmacy meeting to speak to these compounds before they voted. So our laboratory information management system, or LIMS, is actually called Forensic Advantage. And we have talked for years about providing a pre-log function for casework where law enforcement could enter the information about cases into the system remotely so that that information was already in the system when they came in when they come in to be submitted. And this is something that there have been fits and starts in making this happen, some of which was us seeing if we wanted to move to another system, but also different versions of our current LIMS has made it so that it has just needed continual work. But certainly the pandemic has highlighted the need for pre-log where law enforcement can minimize the amount of time that they spend in our evidence receiving section. And so this is now put back on our priority list so that we can hopefully get this rolled out sooner than later. We'd also been working on a pre-log system for the data bank samples. And so these are for the DNA samples that are collected for qualifying offenders and qualifying arrestees. And so this project was funded through a grant. It would make it so that the LIDS system with the compensation board would no longer be necessary, and that whether or not somebody had a sample already in the data bank would be could be checked using this new system. And because it does require legislation for implementation, we would need to put some agency legislation forward allowing for the use of the new system. Unfortunately, with the short session and the bill limits that legislators have for this short session, we have not gotten approval to put this agency legislation forward. And so this will be something that hopefully we can pilot this year, where maybe a few agencies would be willing to use both, so that we could pilot the system, but also have them still work within the current code. And hopefully this can be acted upon next year. Lastly, our PERC tracking system is integrated into our LIMS, so that the PERCs, once they come into our system, those steps, once they're in the laboratory, noting that the case has been worked and that kind of stuff, are all done seamlessly through our LIMS. And one thing that we have done recently regarding the PERC tracking system is sent out a satisfaction survey to those agencies that are using it, as well as not just law enforcement, but also collection agencies and anyone else who is an authorized user. So we got back a lot of great information, and we are sharing some of that information with the vendor who created the system, so that hopefully we can make changes for improvements in the future. One other thing that we have done as an agency outreach is we have published a legal resources webpage. And our counsel, Amy Jenkins, has done a great job pulling together information that attorneys might need for the myriad of different issues that might come up relating to forensic science. And so this is just a list of the different pages that are available. And so there are some example court orders and that type of thing that people can use as templates as well. All right, the last thing I wanted to go over was just some information about our agency budget and resources. So with the hiring freeze that was put in place by the Chief of Staff and was lifted October 26th, we were able to save some funds, and we did pledge some of that savings back to the budget in fiscal year 20. We ended up pledging $300,000 from our agency. So the hiring freeze, we did have exemptions for positions that were directly related to public safety. And so that included forensic scientists and toxicologist staff, as well as folks that work in the data bank and folks that work in the evidence receiving section. So it was mostly admin type folks that had, and some of the support staff in the laboratory that were frozen for that time period. So this is just showing our biennial budget for fiscal year 21 and 22. Our MEL is 331. Although we were notified yesterday that DPB has increased our MEL for the non-general fund from 3 to 4, so that we are able to hire someone for a grant that we have received. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So there have been a lot of things that have happened with the biennial budget. In the governor's initial introduced budget, there were these 3 items. One was to authorize us to spend some non-general funds and an FTE for a DNA research grant. And that has remained in the budget. But 2 other items for our 2 IT positions, and then the increased maintenance costs of some of our newer instrumentation in toxicology and drug chemistry. Those items were both unallocated and then removed from the budget before it was approved and signed after the special session. The governor's introduced budget that he presented on December 16th for fiscal year 22 does include both of those items that were removed previously from fiscal year 21. They've been re-added back in for fiscal year 22 with the addition of one additional finance position so that we can hopefully have enough staff to meet all the needs for the requirements of the APA and ARMIX and that sort of thing. So just as a reminder, we did receive two different funding sources for COVID-19 related spending. The CARES Act, that money has basically been utilized at this point, and that was generally for services and equipment, things like hand sanitizer and the services of the cleaning company for when we needed disinfecting before we had that in-house. We also had received funding from the Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding, which is through DCJS, and we are thankful for that. And that is being used to create some more continuity of operations potential in the breath alcohol section, so that when they go out to certify instruments, that they can do everything they need from the field instead of having to have someone in the office, and the forensic training section so that we can continue offering some online courses. And then just these last slides, I won't go over them in any kind of detail, but basically these, of all the grants that you have approved for us to seek and accept funds, these are the ones where we have received the funds, and I just wanted to let you know what those are. And so this first grant on this slide, the research grant for the toxicology project, that is the one that we just worked with DPB to increase our MEL so that we are able to hire a scientist to work on this project. And we are continuing to receive some funds through the Office of the Attorney General and their SACI grant so that we can continue to employ our full-time PERC tracking system coordinator, who is making this, the use of the PERC tracking system, easier for all of its users by providing support. And also doing some additional testing in some older cases where they were collected prior to DNA analysis. And that is the information I had to share with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
No questions? Thank you, Director Jackson. If you will look at your agenda, the next item is old business. Ms. Jenkins will report on the microscopic hair comparison case review. Ms. Jenkins?
Good morning, everybody. I am happy to give you an update on the microscopic hair comparison case review. You might recall with your October meeting that we had just finished reviewing some transcripts with the review team and the subcommittee recommending notifications, and those notifications had gone out. I was hopeful that we would have enough earlier this year to set up another review team meeting, but in looking at what we have, we just don't have enough transcripts yet. We've got 2 that are there. Jess Norton, the department's legal assistant, has sent out 41 more positive probative letters to circuit courts trying to obtain conviction information and get transcripts. So hopefully once we get the responses on those, we will get enough transcripts together to be able to get the review team together and have another transcript review. And that's kind of where we are at this point in time, just still looking for materials for review.
Anybody have any questions? All right, the next order of business is under item 7, new business, and we'll stick with Ms. Jenkins. Give us a periodic review of regulations.
Sure. So you all may recall under Executive Order 14 of Governor Northam, regulatory bodies are required to review the regulations for the body every 4 years. It's called a periodic review. The last time the board did this for the majority of our regulations was at the beginning of 2017, so we are at the 4-year mark. The due date is actually May 30th of 2021, but lawyers don't like to run up against due dates. So my thought would be the majority of the regulations we have, which are 6 VAC 4020 through 6 VAC 4060, are ready for the periodic review. And this is when we kind of look at the regulations to determine if they're still required, if they're overbroad, what impact they might have on the economy, those types of things. This is a body that has very few regulations, and what we do is very limited to what is absolutely necessary, so I'm not really anticipating any issues, but the process that occurs is that I note that the periodic review is beginning on these 5 sets of regulations. The PPGs are not included because those will actually come up in December of 2021, and that's 6 VAC 40-11. But the remaining ones we would have you all move to start the periodic review. It will get run in the Register of Regulations, and a public comment period will ensue, and then you all will reconsider all of these in May, in addition to a review by the Office of the Attorney General to determine if they are still in compliance with the law, and a governor's office review. So that's kind of the timetable that we're looking at, and so that you can get back together in May to consider any public comment received, any comments by the Attorney General's office or the governor's office, and any other indicators you might want to take a look at as far as their necessity. There may be some legislative changes that might impact these as well. So if we could have a motion to have me initiate the periodic review of 6 VAC 40-20 through 40-60, that and have that approved, I will then proceed to publish it in the periodic, or in the Register of Regulations rather, and get this moving for the board.
Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
Carl Hayes. so moved.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Carl Hayes, so moved.
Is there a second?
Herring, second.
Good. Could we have a tally?
Okay, before I start the roll call vote, I just wanted to note that Colonel Settle is present, as
Yes.
well as Colette McKeon.
Ms. Taylor, we're having a little difficulty hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
That's better, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to note that Colonel Settle and Colette McKeon are present in the meeting.
Okay, so noted.
Okay, I will start the roll call now.
Okay.
Colonel DeBoard,
Maggie DeBoard, yes.
Director Dion,
Shannon Dion, yes.
Dr. Edinburgh,
Les Edinburgh, yes.
Dr. Gormley,
Bill Gormley, yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Carl Hayes, yes.
Delegate Herring,
Delegate Herring, yes.
Ms. Willett,
Yes?
Ms. McKeon,
Colette McKeon, yes.
Mr. Myers,
Rich Myers, yes.
Colonel Settle,
Gary Settle, yes.
Dr. Tony, Dr. Tony,
Denise Tony, yes.
thank you. Ms. Wood,
Yes.
the motion passes.
Motion passes.
That's all I have on that, Mr. Lett. Thank you.
Okay. If you look at your agenda, the next item is under Number 8, public comment. Is there any member of the public available who wants to comment on what's been going on so far? Any member of the public? All right, hearing none, we move on down the agenda to number 9. That's where we adjourn. That concludes the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Colette McKeon, that's my motion.
Is there a second?
Bill Gormley, I can second that.
Ms. Taylor, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Colonel DeBoer,
Maggie DeBoard, yes.
Director Dion,
Shannon Dion, yes.
Dr. Edinburgh,
Les Edinburgh, aye.
Dr. Gormley,
Bill Gormley, yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Carl Hayes, yes.
Delegate Henry,
Delegate Hearing, yes.
Mr. Lett,
David Lett, yes.
Mr.
Colette McKeon, yes.
Mr. Myers,
Rich Myers, yes.
Colonel Settle,
Gary Settle, yes.
Dr. Tony,
Denise Tony, yes.
Ms. White,
Yes.
the meeting is adjourned.
I didn't hear the last. Ms. Taylor,
Yes.
I didn't hear the last thing that you said. Forgive me.
Oh, I said the meeting is adjourned.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good day.
you.